Alrighty, this is a how-to for hybrid OpenShift combining Windows and Linux. Uh, let's get started. So we basically have a Azure ARM template that's set up to create the infrastructure. We use Azure for this, and then within that environment, then we use two sets of playbooks. We use the OVN set of playbooks, and then a Windows set, Ansible playbook. So if you're looking for this, this is under GitHub. Glenn S. West Hybrid OpenShift is contrib. And then the OVM part is under Glenn S. West at Hybrid. After these get a bit more stable, I'll set up another Git repository in a more appropriate place. So basically, there's two ways to use this. You can use the Hybrid OpenShift contrib, which does the auto creation of the complete cluster, all the related infrastructure, giving you 3 masters, 3 infra, 1 or more Linux compute nodes, 1 more Windows nodes. It does require OpenShift subscriptions as well as RHEL. You can use your employee sub if you're a Red Hatter. It does require Azure subscription as well. Your other choices provision your own infrastructure, either on bare metal or any other cloud provider. Use the provided Ansible host files as an example, and then you can use the Ansible OVN and Windows script. It does have an assumption you have a bastion host. Ansible can be a bit unreliable trying to do things to itself. So consider having at least a small bastion host. So what you get out of this is for the hybrid contrib implementation, you automatically get a bastion, 3 masters, 3 infra, 1 or more Linux compute nodes, which are implemented obviously as VMs, 1 or more Windows nodes. All of this is currently based on OCP 3.9, and then the automatic use of OVN and Windows, and this KubeOvn and Windows scripts, which work in progress. We'll talk about in a moment. So you need to be able to use the scripts. You need to be able to use the ARM command line. And this is the Azure Resource Manager, is what ARM stands for. You can use the version 1 or the version 2. Examples provided on version 1. Create a resource group for the cluster and deploy it. The command line is represented below. We'll walk through this in a bit more in detail. So you log into Azure. I typically recommend a service principal, or you can log into your account. You'll need to type the username and password if you don't create a service principal. The OpenShift reference architecture for 3.6 has details walkthrough on how you do this. Note that you really need to have in the user account, the Azure user account, the ability to create and delete resource groups. You have to have enough quota. So we're creating several VMs. So you must have appropriate core limits in that quota for that account. Must be able to create storage accounts, and please note, underline exclamation point, don't even try trial accounts. You need a proper Azure account. Basically, the trial account will be over before you can even get the deployment done. So the next thing you need to be concerned with is creating a parameter file. This is a JSON file. It contains your Red Hat network username and password, your login for the cluster, the number of nodes you want, your subscription info, a few settings, and most importantly, your public and private SSH key. There's a detailed walkthrough of setting all of this up, again, in the reference architecture for 3.6. Link is included. This is for Azure OpenShift, and is publicly available with a link. So kicking this off, this is an example. Basically, I've taken the commands that are listed, put them in a script. So basically, automatically creates a cluster for me. This starts off. It'll run for 30 to 40 minutes. At the end of it, you'll see the screen. The most important thing here is the host name. Typically, what I will do is use my initials. Note that the name has to be globally unique. So be careful about the name. If you have a name collision, the script will arrow out. Somebody actually is running the scripts, and using my initials, which is kind of aggravating as an example. So just be careful there when you're choosing your name. Everything is put in a resource group, so there's no confusion, but do make sure your initials and your naming is consistent and unique. At this point, you'll SSH into the username you provided in the parameter file and the host that you saw at the end of the script. You connect to the Bastion host. From the Bastion host, then you can connect to any other host. Now, note when I say this is temporary, this is for the following commands. These will be pushed back into OpenShift install, and OpenShift install will run them automatically. At the moment, I run them individually because it makes it easier to tell what's going on until we get it a little bit more polished and consistent. So we do an OpenShift install, which basically gets this cluster up. At the end of that, we're going to pull the hybrid. You may have to do a setup clients if your OCP is not working. Then as root, you're going to do an OVN pre-setup, which does the building of OVN and such. You could actually do this in parallel as the cluster is getting set up as well. Then after that, the OVN post setup has to be done at the end of the OpenShift install. And then finally, because we're changing the SDN per the document, we have to recreate containers, which basically redoes the registry and the router on the new SDN, and then recreate the console. At this point, then we're ready to run the windows.yaml. So if we're using the scripts independently, and this is the hybrid scripts, you basically would create your cluster, and that cluster can be on any cloud provider or bare metal. So there's no problem. So the OVN pre-setup, OVN post-setup basically runs the KubeOvn SDN solution. Note that you must disable the Red Hat SDN and use the CNI plugin. If you go to the hybrid OpenShift contrib and look at the bastion.sh, you will find embedded the creation of the Ansible host file with the appropriate switches you need. Then note you'll still have to have the subscriptions, and you must be able to do yum installs for this on this infrastructure. Alrighty, so the Windows nodes, when we're done, you need to make sure if you're creating them from scratch that you have the appropriate version. This is Data Center Core 1709 with containers. Generally on Azure, say latest. This gets updated very, very often. If you don't have the latest, you end up needing to do an update on the Windows nodes and then reboot. If you're using latest, at least on Azure, the version is perfectly fine already. So Windows.yaml, you need to do some setup if you're doing this on something that's not provisioned using the OpenShift hybrid contrib to make sure you're ready to use Ansible for Windows. So there's some prerequisites that you need to install and set up in Python to make Ansible happy with Windows nodes. And then you need to set up your group vars. If you're doing your own Windows nodes, there's some additional boot up time setup that you need to do as well. This is embedded actually in the JSON file on the Azure side. If you have questions, feel free to ask. Just to reiterate, this is the hybrid scripts. This is a combination of the two OVNs as well as the Windows node setups. Currently, I'm working through a stability problem that I will be doing here shortly that will basically turn on the no proxy option and clear some IP table rules that should make services work a lot more reliably. Obviously, once those things are done, I'll automatically run the OVN and Windows scripts during the ARM deployment. We have a lot more testing with Windows, and then there's an Epic on Trello of follow-on. But all of this should let you get started and enjoying fun. Thank you for your time.